Assalamu alaikum. In this video we'll see how to use SQFLITE to store our data locally, and actually we would do a CRUD operation where you would be able to create new data and store them in the database in SQFLITE. And after that we'll be able to edit them. So let's go ahead and edit them. And we see that our change persists, and as well as we'd be able to delete them if we want. To get started, make sure that on the terminal you have this command, and then after that you can hit enter and it will download the latest SQFLITE to your Flutter app. All because I've already downloaded it, so let's go ahead. So after that, go ahead and make sure that you create a file which is called sqlhelper.dart, and then we'll import these two packages. One is foundation and the other one is SQL as SQL. Then we'll create a class. The class name would be SQL helper, and inside this we'll create our first method. The method name is create tables, and as you can see that it will take the SQL database object, and inside this we'll run this command, or actually function, which is called database.execute, and inside this we are going to create a table. The table name is items, and here we'll have ID as integer, then title as a text, and description as a text as well, as you can see, and we'll also have this created at, which is for saving the date. Now this section is pretty much the same as MySQL database. So anyway, so this is the method that should get called in a lot of operations that we are going to do. So all we are doing over here is creating a database table. The table name is items. We are done with that. After that, we'll create another method, and the method name is db. So well, this is the method actually that's calling create tables, as you can see. So this is the method, the one that we created, but it's coming from this db method, but you can call it anything you want. And once it creates a table, actually it would also attach it to a database name. So in our case, you can name it anything you want. So well, I have already created one which is called dbtech.db, and this time I'll just create dbesttech.db. so that would be our database, and inside the database we'll have this table which is called items. So what will happen each time we create an item from our UI or update an item, so this db method would get called. Eventually create tables will get called. So what will happen over here, first it will check if this database exists or not. If it exists, if it not exist, it will create one for first time, and then it will also check if we have a table. Well, now if the table already exists, it won't create. So when you call this method the second time, eventually it will just return us a database object, and that database object also would help us to connect with this table over here. And after that we'll create another method. The method name is create item. Now this create item would be called from a button click. Now this would be our button, and from this button would call this method on pressed event. Now as we call it, we'll pass title and a description, and these are the items that we want to save in the database. So this would be coming from our front end code where we have the text controller. And as you can see, as we call this method, first it will call sqlhelper.db method, which is this one, and this one eventually would call this one. Okay, and before we go ahead and insert item, well, if we click on this, we'll have text controller would pop up, or a dialog box would pop up, and we'll type in our title and description. Then we'll grab our title and a description, and after that we'll open our database connection. and this would be the object, and at the same time we'll put our data in a map format. And once we do that, then we'll call this method, which is called db.insert. Now, because of this method, which is called db.insert, we'll be able to insert items in this table, and this is the data. So remember, you have to insert the data in map format. So you can get them over here in the function, but as you insert, it has to be a map format. So each time you insert, you have to mention your table name and the data, as well as this is another property we should set. Now this would help you to prevent from duplicate entry, and it's a good practice. And after that, actually we are returning an ID. So db.insert, if it can insert data successfully, it returns an ID of that row in the database. And after that, we'll create another method. Now this method would get called first time when we launch our app or reload our app. So what it will do, it will get all the items from our database. So once again, first we get our database connection, and then we do a query. Now you need to perform db.query when you want to get an item. And once again, you have to mention your table name and how you want to get the data. So we want to get the data based on ID. So it would use ID to organize our data. Now db.insert we use for inserting, db.query for getting one data or all the data or certain data from database. So as you can see, after that we return a future type, but inside this we return a list of map. So as I said earlier, that once you insert data, that has to be inserted as a map. Once you retrieve the data, whatever the data you get and return, that also has to be in this map format. So we'll have a lot of data. All this data would be saved in a list like that. And after that, we'll create another method. Now this method would be responsible for just getting one item from our database, SQL database. Now this would be, of course, certainly based on certain ID from our SQLite database. And once again, we get the database connection. Now over here, we are passing extra properties and parameters because we want to get a certain data based on this ID, and we only want to get one. And you have to remember, so also you have to use the ID as in the condition and the database name. Now you may get confused, when do you use that? Now you use this if you want to get one data or update certain data. If you want to update certain row in the database, you have to use certain ID. Now over here we created another method. This is called update item. So for update item, you may want to update the title and the description as well. So here's the typo, let's fix that, and here this one as well. Anyway, so as we want to edit or update an item, we'll have access to this ID. Remember, before we really update, we'll call this method, and this method would help us to get a certain ID. And we'll see it very soon how we get that. So once again, we also have over here this data format in a map. So if you don't know what is map, check out my other tutorials. And then over here, so this map contains all the updated data like title and description. And we have to make sure that we also update the time in our database table. So after that, just like db.insert, we also have db.update. So we have here items, our data, and because we are updating certain element in the database, so we also have to get that ID. So that ID actually is mentioned over here, which one will pass from here. Okay, the last method we'll create, that is called delete item. So this is our delete item over here. And once again, if you want to delete a certain element, so you should use ID, and that's what we did. And once again, we are mentioning which ID, and it falls to this condition where. So if you want to send ID as a parameter with a certain value which would be changing, you have to use both where and where args, like as you can see we did early. So with this, we have this basic CRUD methods. They're all ready. Now this is the time we go ahead and work with our UI. So this is our main.dart file, and right after this, actually we are going to declare one list item and a method. So as you can see here, first we have created a list of maps. And as I said earlier over here, if we want to retrieve all the data from the database, it returns us a list of maps. So that's why first here we created one empty list of maps. Of course, we have a boolean for loading data. Then as you see over here, we have this method which is called refresh journals. Now with this, actually we'll to retrieve all the items from our database, and we'll save this in a variable which is called data. Now data will, in a set state method, will assign it to journals, the one that we created. So once again over here we are calling get items. It will return us a list of maps. As you can see, one more time, get items, it returns a list of maps. And all we need to do right now, we need to go ahead and call this. To be able to call this, we'll just copy this one from here, and then we'll put it over here. And as we did that, actually we could do one thing over here. We could do a print method, and go. Now this is the time that we go ahead and reload our app, and if we do that, hopefully in the terminal over here, we'll see this message, number of items. So let's go ahead and do that. So after restarting our app, we see that number of items is 0 because we don't have any items. So it means that we are actually successfully able to create this as well as the table. Now we could print and check out on this. So here we do, over here we would say creating a table, and would print a log over here, and we'd also, well, now let's restart it and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so number of items is 0. Now why this is not printing? Because the table, which is items, has already been created. So if it's created, it checks for you automatically, this method open database. So it does it automatically for you, so that's why it's not going inside this. Will it make sense? Anyway, so now we'll come to our main.dart over here. Now inside this, actually right after this app bar, we want to create a floating action button, and this is our floating action button. And inside this button, actually we want to create a show form method. We don't have the method, but we could just simply pass null to it, and here we do see that we have this one. So as we click on this, actually we want to be able to show a form over here and then submit the data. So this is our method show form, and this is the method that actually we want to call from here. So we'll just simply call it show form, and inside this for now we'll pass null. Now as you can see over there, and inside this, actually we are going to use text controller. We don't have them yet, so we are going to declare 2 text controller object at the top over here, and with this our error is gone. Now inside this, actually first we are checking we have an ID or not. Now this would be used to update our items and submit in the database, so we'll look at that later. For now we're gonna ignore that. And then over here we see that we have show model bottom shade. So this is what that we want to be able to click and show. So we are passing context and things like that. And inside the build method, we have this basic styling where we have this padding, and because we want to show both title and description, so that's why we are having a column over here, and inside the column we have this children text field, and we have a bit of height with the sized box and another text field for description, and then sized box again. And well, that's all about this show model bottom sheet and show form method, which is being called from here. Now we're gonna save it, and then we want to be able to click on this and see that we would be able to view a form. So well, this is our form. So over here we have title and a description. So well, of course, definitely we can type over here, this is a title and this is our description. Well, now of course we don't have any buttons over here, so we need to create buttons. Now, as we saw earlier, that actually this show form would be used both for creating new items as well as updating new item, updating the items that already we'll see in future over here. Now, to be able to do that, right down over here, actually we need to create elevated buttons with conditions. Here is our elevated button, and inside this actually we have two methods, and we are checking with ID first, the ID that actually we referred at the top over here. Now this ID would be passed down to this method, and we'll see how to do that. But anyway, so first over here inside this elevated method, we check if the ID is null, then we go ahead and do add item, which would help us to create new items. If ID is not null, then we'll go ahead and update an item. And after that, we just clear the text field, and we'll also return to our earlier UI. And based on the ID, we want to show if we have a new item that we are going to create or whether we are going to update an item. Now this time actually we need to go ahead and add the method. Before we do that, actually I'm going to comment out this. So for now, inside this elevated button, inside this onPressed event, all we need to do, go ahead and create a method for this. Well, the method already we mentioned, we will go ahead and create one. Now this method actually would be creating at the top before the show form method. So we're gonna create it here. Its name is add item, so this is being called. Now as it being called, actually inside this we are going to pass our text controller and the title as well as the description controller. So this is the method create item that we created early over here. As you can see, it takes title and description, and title and description we put them in a map, and after that we insert into database. So this is the method add item should get called from this onPressed event inside this elevated button. Now we'll refresh our app one more time over here, and then for now our item's still 0, and we'll click on this one and we'll create some values for this in the text controller. Here we'll say title, and here we'll say new description. So here we'll click on this create new. Now you have to know one thing though, that so as we clicked on this onPressed floating action button, actually we didn't pass any ID to this show form method, which is this one, so it doesn't fall in this condition. So because ID is null, so when ID is null, as you can see over here, that we show that we are going to create a new item over here. Anyway, so let's go ahead and create. Well, after submitting the button, to be able to see that how many items we have, actually we can click over here and actually put this line, which was early in init state, but init state only gets called first time when the app loads or we refresh our UI on purpose. But actually we can read the message immediately right after this add method once we call this method. Remember, refresh journals, what it does over here, it loads all the items from the database, and that's it. So now over here, yes, it does look like 0 because it's coming from init state, right? But init state, as we know, that it gets first time called, or if you refresh your app. Now, well, just now we updated, but we don't see anything, but we would submit another one and we'll see that we'll have more information over here. So let's go ahead and do this one, like title 2, and here we would say description 2. Now let's go ahead and create a new one, and here we see that our number of items is 2, and we create more items. So here we'll say title 3 and description 3. So we'll see that it updates automatically. So let's submit it, and we see the number of items 3. Okay, so success, we are able to put the data in our SQLite database successfully. Now we also want to show them in the UI. So to be able to show them in the UI, we need to come over here and create a body section. So here is our body section, and inside this we have list view builder, and we get all the length, and then we have this item builder, and we are showing everything inside this card. And as you know that we are saving all the data inside the journals list, so we can access them using this index, and we get each of the properties like title and description. So we can go ahead and restart our app, and as you can see that this is what we have now. So this app is already working. Now we're gonna create a new one over here, and we'll see that we'll see it immediately. So here it's a title 4 and a description 4. So let's create it, and we see it immediately. Awesome. So it means that our submitting data in the database is working. So this is the time we go ahead and be able to edit them. Now to be able to edit them, actually inside this we can work with trailing. Now you can see that I have added a new property which is called a trailing, and inside this we have this sized box, we have this special width, and then we want to show everything in a row like the edit icon and delete icon. So let's save it, and we'll see that edit and delete. Now inside this edit section, inside this icon button for editing, as you see on the onPressed event, we are calling show form again, the one that we called on this button press. And inside this, actually we are passing this ID, because each of the journals we can access the certain one using index, and for that one we can also access the ID. So now if you go and look at this one, so you'll see that, so we are passing ID, so ID is not null. If ID is not null, for that ID, whatever we got earlier, so we search that element. If the ID is equal to the ID of one of those elements, then we return to it, and for that one we return our title and description. Remember, this journals, this gets called over here like inside this method, and then it gets updated. So it reads everything from the database and then update this journal list. So if we were looking for some elements for updating or deleting, actually we can find inside this, and based on that we can do a lot of interesting stuff. So let's go ahead and restart our app one more time, and then we'll see that we'll be able to change our title or description or data. So let's go ahead and click on this. So over here we have this information. So here we would say title 0, and over here we do description 0. Well, we tried to update, but it didn't work. Okay, now the reason why it didn't work, let's come down over here, because we have to check this update item method, but we don't have this method yet. So we need to go ahead and create this method. So once you change anything over here, eventually this elevated button that one gets called and it checks if the ID is null or not. If the ID is null, it means we are creating a new one. If that is not null, then this section should get called, but we don't have any method, so we have to create one and then it would work. So we'll go at the top over here, and right after this add item, we're gonna create a new method which is called update item, and we are passing the ID. And as we pass the ID to it over here, we also pass ID to this update item method, the text section from the text controller, and the description section. So now we need to calm down over here and uncomment this, and we should be good to go. Let's restart our app, and then we're gonna click on this, and then we're going to change this one to title 0, and over here we're gonna change it to description 0, and then here we'll click on this update, and as you can see, it works. Well, it's pretty much working, so update method is working. We can also change over here, we can change it to test, and here we do the same thing, test, and we do see that it works immediately. Well, then next we need to work on this delete button, which we have over here. So for delete button, we do see that over here we already have an icon button. All we need to do, create a new method and call it from here. So we'll go at the top, and we know that right before this show form, actually we can create a new method. The method name is delete item, and we have to pass the ID for that one. Well, the ID, as we can say, we saw that we can get it from list view builder. Anyway, so after deleting, we also show a scaffold messenger with a message, and then we reload everything. Remember, each time after deleting, updating, and creating, we always reload our items from the database, all of them, because that's the latest and updated one. Anyway, so now we'll copy this one and come down to our UI section over here, and we'll just simply pass this one, and inside this we want to pass the ID. So now the ID once again is coming from here, so grab it and put it over here, and we are good to go. Now let's restart it, and we see that they're here. So I'm going to click on this, and we'll see that it goes or it's just gone immediately. So as you can see, we can also remove this, we can remove this, we can remove this, and let's go ahead and create a new one over here. It's a new title and new description. Okay, so let's go ahead and create one, and we see that, and we can edit that. So here we say title 4, new description 4, let's update. Great, delete the earlier one. Yeah, so that's how it works. So if you learned something, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Thank you.